Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, your co-host and PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications. And filling in for Rowena Ishon this week is my colleague, Matt Fleming, PRI's Communications Director. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. Well, before we get into our podcast today, we have all sorts of interesting topics to talk about, including one that you and I have had to deal with over the years during our time at the state capitol. And that, of course, is this issue over so much of what goes on at the Capitol happens behind closed doors. And last year, of course, the big issue was what came to light was the Newsom administration signing NDAs allegedly to debate and craft legislation with special interest groups behind closed doors. And kind of the latest example of this is KCRA reporter Ashley Zavala, who's the president of the Sacramento Press Club, and she kind of had her own little mini Norma Ray moment on the in the back of the Senate chambers. Her point being that the Senate is basically through rules adopted under the guise of the pandemic, limiting press access both on the floor and kind of in the area immediately behind the Senate chambers. It's something we had to deal with all the time. In the Assembly, there's plenty of press access. Members want to talk to the press. Maybe there's a few members here or there who don't want to have a camera put in their face, but there's ways to kind of sneak out around them. And in this way, it seems like, maybe the Senate leadership has been annoyed by the press in recent months, but it's kind of their job to sit there and answer the questions, because in the people's house, the media and the public should have a right to access and the right to know. And coming during last week was Sunshine Week, where we talk about and advocate for more openness in state government. Thought it was a pretty big blunder on the part of Dems, and they're digging in their heels. Sounds like one that isn't going to be solved anytime soon. What's your thoughts, and certainly based on your experience working with press at the Capitol?
Well, sure. I had my experience working with press at the Capitol. I also had my experience occupying one of those seats. And to me, this whole the whole thing speaks to the strength of Ashley Zavala in the legislature. She is constantly breaking news that sets the agenda, that makes lawmakers panic. And I can't help but think this is really just a reaction to her and her hard work. Members don't like being followed and asked hard questions by her. As you pointed out, some of them really do. Too many of them don't. And I can't help but think this is really just Senate Democratic leadership trying to protect members who are uncomfortable with a TV reporter following them, asking them questions on the floor and asking them questions outside of the Senate chambers. I was trying to think about it as we were preparing for this, and it's really sort of unprecedented. It's just not something that happens in Congress. The press access rules are pretty good. And as you pointed out, the Assembly, the press access rules are pretty good. In the Senate, until 2 years ago, the press access rules were pretty good. So I think it's an unforced error. Hopefully lawmakers come to their senses, because access by the media is really important.
And the other thing that's interesting too is, of course, and we know this, and we tell legislators and others who we've worked with in a press capacity over the years, when you don't talk to the press, the story becomes that much worse, and it can fester out of control into becoming a major scandal that could have been nipped in the bud if you had only talked to the reporter when they first asked.
I agree with you. If there are a competent comms person can prepare their member for what's to come. If you have a strategy, you can kind of deal with it, and you can make or respond to press inquiries responsibly and effectively and competently. The other thing that I just find so ironic about this is how much so many of these members want to get to Congress and want to be elected to higher office. And in Congress, this is standard. Anywhere you go, you are hounded by reporters. When you step off the floor, there are scrums of 100 or so reporters, TV, print, radio, waiting to ask you questions, following you into elevators, doing any number of things. And it just shows how the weakness of so many members in the California legislature's political skills.
So one of those bad stories that the Senate might be trying to protect its members from was the revelation that came out last week that Governor Newsom's plan, only enacted in the last year or so, to expand Medi-Cal to the remaining number of undocumented immigrants. We've had it Medi-Cal eligibility for the young and the elderly. Now, basically, everybody who would be left. Well, not surprisingly, that's a really expensive program, and it's more expensive than the administration projected in their budget efforts. And now, first they asked for a loan, and now they're asking for the legislature to enact an additional $3 billion or so in funding from the general fund to pay for this. I think it sort of goes to the kind of budgeting we do behind closed doors. It goes to there isn't the oversight that there should be, and there isn't the scrutiny that there should be when these proposals, especially very expensive new proposals, go through the budget process. And one would think if there had been a really robust discussion of this item and the real costs of it, maybe legislators might have, I won't say they would have thought twice, but maybe they would have gone into it with clearer eyes as to how much this would cost. It's certainly not the only time something like this has happened, but the amount of money is certainly staggering, and it's going to make the governor's budget balancing efforts that much more complicated this year when the budget from January was already built on kind of a house of cards, and with the stock market declining, capital gains tax revenue isn't going to be what we expected. Matt, what say you?
To me, it really highlights the difference between managing a household budget and managing a government budget. In a household budget, for most normal people, or more, I should say, most fiscally responsible people, you want something and you think, do I have the money to pay for it? And then you either come up with ways to pay for it, or you decide to postpone it, or you just say you look for cheaper alternatives or something like that. In the government, especially California, it just seems that they decide they're going to do something and then think, oh, we'll just figure out how we're going to pay for it later. And inevitably that comes in the form of higher taxes. This is just it's an absurdly political decision to make this program. California lawmakers love to highlight and brag about being the first in the nation, blah, blah, blah. But being first isn't always good. Sometimes you just don't want to get to where you're going at all. Being the first person to bankruptcy isn't a badge of honor. And on one hand, I am pleased to see this backfiring so spectacularly. This is yet another thing that Gavin Newsom has tried to do, govern to headlines. And then when the check comes due, he's hoping that, he can be far enough removed onto a higher office that he can say, well, it wasn't implemented effectively. Much like all of his programs that bombed in San Francisco. By the time he was lieutenant governor, he's like, well, I'm not mayor anymore. That was 10 years ago, that kind of stuff. So I'm glad to see this failing in real time. Unfortunately, I think it is rude and sets unfair expectations for people who are here illegally, who maybe shouldn't be here, but also that doesn't mean, in my mind, that they need to be jerked around by the state. And it also affects citizen taxpayers who are going to have to pay the bill, because it doesn't seem that Gavin Newsom and the California legislature want to amend this program in any way, want to go back on this program in any way. It's full steam ahead, even though it's an absurdly terrible idea. This was passed last year when they were still under the belief that Kamala Harris was going to be, it was a certainty that she was going to be the next president. And undoubtedly, she would have probably bailed the state out. But now she's not here and the check is due.
Who knows? Maybe she'll have the chance to deal with it when she is elected governor, if you believe the rumors. Which leads us into our next topic, which is, I think, an entertaining one. So President Trump made waves over the weekend when he fired off a Truth Social post criticizing a portrait of him that had been painted and hung in the Colorado state capitol, along with the portraits. They apparently have portraits painted of every U.S. president. Now, he has taken this portrait to be as some sort of a, under the radar attack of him by the governor of Colorado, who's a Democrat, Jared Polis. I don't know. I looked at the portrait and I thought, well, yes, he does look a little chubbier than he normally is, but it's certainly, I've seen a lot worse portraits, and it evokes the portraits of the governors that when you come to Sacramento, can see as a tourist at the state capitol. I had the opportunity opportunity when Governor Schwarzenegger's portrait was unveiled. We went to the portrait unveiling and we had a little mini reunion of the Schwarzenegger administration then. And his portrait is really quite a good portrait. It's what you would expect. Of course, the most infamous one is the one of Jerry Brown, which is sort of in an abstract style, and it's not even finished because he says, well, my life is unfinished. Matt, what do you think of all this portrait controversy, portrait gate? Does the president have a point here?
It's not the most flattering painting, but as you pointed out, it's definitely not the worst. It's certainly, in my mind, not the kind of thing I would expect from arguably the most powerful person in the world to be occupying his time. It's disappointing that this is what he's hung up on. It's kind of funny to watch. There's nothing more satisfying than watching the proud get irritated about these kinds of things, and Donald Trump suffers from intense pride, and I don't mean that as a compliment. It's funny too. He was in the social media post blasting this painting. He's just being so complimentary of how beautiful the painting is of Barack Obama. I don't know, Tim. I mean, you're a comms guy. I'm a comms guy. If I was advising anyone about this, I would say I would just drop it because you're just going to look ridiculous and petty and proud, and you will look like you're focused on all the wrong things. And the reason why I would say that is because that's exactly how it looks with Trump.
That's right. And, also, too, art's in the eye of the beholder. The Obamas and many people fawned over those portraits of the two of them that hang in the National Portrait Gallery, Washington, D.C. I'm actually not really a fan of either of those paintings. My thoughts on the subjects of those paintings notwithstanding, I don't think they're particularly great art. But again, that's my subjective view on the art of it. But I think that's right, that it's, we certainly have bigger fish to fry than, whether a painting of someone is good or bad in the Colorado State Capitol. The subject of this week's podcast, which is a special presentation of our audio from our recent Sacramento Policy Conference with our Lance Izumi, Senior Director of PRI Center for Education, discussing this debate over the science of reading and science of math with Assembly Member Blanca Rubio, who is leading the charge in California for reform to kind of go back to the tried and true ways of teaching reading in the state, which was abandoned a while back in favor of more progressive education methods that aren't really particularly effective. And this comes in light of the news from last week that Harvard is going to offer remedial math to its students because, well, public schools aren't making the grade in preparing kids even to do math at Harvard. Matt, it's certainly, when you think about what Assemblymember Rubio has to say, which is quite compelling, and when you hear stories like these, it just makes you wonder, why aren't we doing more to prepare our kids to really succeed in the economy of the future? And it seems like we debate all sorts of other silly things and we leave the fundamentals, reading and math, kind of to the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, when I went to community college, I had to take remedial math classes because by the time I had arrived at community college, I had forgotten everything. Not that I really learned it to begin with, but I had forgotten everything. So this certainly isn't an indictment of remedial math classes at college, but you have to remember, in context, this is Harvard. If any student should be college ready, it is a Harvard student, not a community college student, a Harvard student. And it really just, they're framing it as a failure of COVID, which certainly magnified and increased the problem. But this is really about college preparedness. And you're right. Why aren't high schools, K through 12, preparing kids for college, preparing kids in math and in reading and how to write, which are all things that employers and colleges are complaining that students aren't ready to do? But why aren't we having more of that discussion? So much is focused on whether or not we need to have a Department of Education, which is a legitimate policy debate, but at its core and at a more granular level, we need to be asking ourselves, why is the education establishment not better preparing students? And to take it even a step further, it's not so much that they're not better preparing them. You can see a consistent decline year over year, decade over decade. The things are just getting worse. And this only highlights the problem that even at elite universities like Harvard, kids are not prepared.
Well, it's certainly an interesting topic and one it's good to see some legislators are focusing their time on. And I think if you're interested in the future of education in our country, this discussion today you will find particularly compelling. So thanks so much for tuning in and joining us. And after the break, we'll have Lance Izumi in discussion with Assembly Member Blanca Rubio. Just released from Encounter Books, read the new book from PRI's Sally Pipes, The World's Medicine Chest, available now at your favorite online bookstore. The World's Medicine Chest explores how America became the world's leader in biopharmaceutical innovation through market capitalism. But as Sally Pipes writes, America is the last best hope for millions around the world who are battling rare diseases and chronic conditions. As you'll read in The World's Medicine Chest, we can do more to fight and cure disease, but only if we continue to embrace private sector innovation over government regulation. Buy The World's Medicine Chest today at Amazon.com or your favorite online bookseller. Well, our next conversation focuses on education reform in California. And recently, you may have read in the newspaper that the results of the National Association of Education Progress, or more commonly known as NAEP, Lance loves that, how much I love acronyms, were released. And once again, sadly, California students scored at the bottom in reading and math. And parents and students and taxpayers are growing increasingly frustrated by the inability of California schools to educate our kids for the future. And they're even more frustrated to learn that why our schools are doing so badly. And often the case is it's because of outdated and ineffective learning models. And our Lance Izumi explores this subject in depth in his latest book, The Great Classroom Collapse. Now, fortunately, there's a bipartisan movement to change how we teach our kids reading and math that's sweeping the country. And we're pleased to have with us today one of the courageous leaders in that movement and someone who Lance profiles in his book. I think you're all really going to be interested in this last discussion before lunch. So please join me in giving a big welcome to Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio, who will be in conversation with PRI's Lance Izumi.
Well, thank you very much, Tim, for that kind introduction, and thank you, all of you, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and join all of us here. I'm sure that the remarks you've heard up to now have been really informative. I think that you're going to find this half hour to be just as informative and just really eye-opening as I found it when I interviewed Assembly Member Rubio. As Tim mentioned, education is one of the most consequential policy topics in California, and one of the most, I think, consequential at PRI. I've been the education director at Pacific Research Institute now for the past 30 years, and so I've seen a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of what's gone on in California has gone in the wrong direction. And we have, as Tim mentioned, the test scores that are going through the floor. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, the test that Tim mentioned, is often referred to as the nation's report card because it is administered in almost all of the states. And yet, in the 8th grade here in California, for the test takers in our state, 72%, so nearly 3/4 of California's 8th graders fail to perform at the proficient level in reading. And think about that, right? That if you've reached the 8th grade and you cannot read proficiently. Well, what does that mean for all of you, for the state, but also for, of course, those children? That means that you're more likely to drop out of high school, you're more likely to not go to college, of course, more likely to be unemployed, and then, as the sheriff was talking about in the last half hour, you're more likely to go into the criminal justice system. All because, why? You can't read. And so therefore, this issue of reading is so important, which is why in the book that Tim mentioned that I wrote, The Great Classroom Collapse, which came out last year, I profiled a number of different people who were addressing the reading issue, this reading collapse, especially here in California. And one of those who I interviewed was our great assembly member here, Blanca Rubio. and she's featured in chapter 8 of my book. So hopefully you'll get a copy of the book, which is available on Amazon.
No plug.
No plug. Yeah, if you're going to read any chapter, read chapter 8 with Assembly Member Rubio. And we're very pleased to have her here to talk about this issue of reading. And one of the reasons I interviewed her was because of legislation that she introduced last year on the issue of reading and how to improve it. Now, before we get to that, though, I wanted to ask her, because one of the things I tried to do in the book, as you would see in all of the chapters, is to try and get to know the people with whom I'm interviewing. And so Assembly Member Rubio has a really interesting story, incredible background, and I would love for you to just tell our audience, many of whom I'm sure don't know you very well, your background, what your life has been, and how did you come to this point?
Perfect. Thank you so very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a little plug for my BFF, Sheriff Cooper, when he was in the legislature. We were partners in crime, if you will, in pun intended, obviously. But the sheriff and I have been friends, really, really good friends, since I got to the legislature 9 years ago. And he has been just advocate for doing the right thing. And I think for most of us, we're there for the same thing. And I was like, hey, I seem to like him because he reminds me of me. As stated, I'm Blanca Rubio. I represent the 48th Assembly District down in Southern California, which is the East San Gabriel Valley. If you're not from the South, it's near Pasadena. I cover Covina, West Covina, Sousa, Baldwin Park, Glendora, a whole bunch of cities, but if you're looking for directions, I'm 22 miles east of downtown LA on this side of Cal Poly Pomona. So the whole valley there, it's been the honor of my life to represent that district. This is the beginning of my 9th year in the legislature, but the beginning of my 28th year as an elected. And if you're doing math, I was 12 when I started doing this. It's interesting how I got here. I was born in Mexico. I'll start with that. I was born in Mexico. We lived in a little town called Weenie, Texas. My dad was part of the Bracero program. And after the Bracero program ended, we still needed to eat. So my dad continued in and out of the country. My dad is 84. He'll be 85 in August and has been in and out of the country since he was 19 years old. So he took us to this little town called Weenie, Texas. When we grew up, we had to Google it because we didn't understand how anybody would name a city Weenie, so we thought that the parents were mispronouncing it. But we lived there for a little while, but we were undocumented because that's how you got to the United States, especially a border town. I come from a town called Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, which is on the border of El Paso, Texas, and Mexico. So we went to Weenie and we were deported back to Juarez. If you know anything about Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, I call it the cartel capital of the world. There's a whole story and a documentary on the women of Juarez, hundreds and hundreds of women that have been abducted, and God knows where they are, but never to be found again. Some of them were being used as mules to transport drugs. God knows what happened to them. So being that was the town that we're from, my parents were adamant about us not growing up there. I'm the oldest, now of 5, but at the time only 4, so I'm the oldest, and there's twins. My sister, Susan Rubio, is a senator, so we'll talk about her in a minute. And my brother, and then a younger sister named Sylvia, and then when we got to California, my parents have a change of life baby, so my brother is only 32. He has all the stories that I'm going to tell you right now, he has no clue or no idea, because by then he was born in the United States. But we were deported, went back to Juarez, and my parents were not, obviously wanted a better life for us, and so we came back to California, this time to Los Angeles. I was undocumented until I was 13 years old, didn't speak English. Just everything that's associated with immigration. Immigrants, people come here for a better life. They don't come here because, at least the ones that I know don't come here to rob the system. That is not why we're here. We've never been on welfare or food stamps or any of that. My dad is very, very proud that he's always worked. My dad worked, as I told you, as a bracero, laborer, anything that he could do. When he came to California, he got a job at a carpet manufacturing company, and he did what's called tufting. So all the patterns that you see on the carpet, my dad did the patterns. We go into anywhere, a hotel, my dad could tell you, oh, I did that one, I did that one. That's how proud he is of the work that he did. And my mom was a housekeeper for over 35 years. They're both retired. And I'm happy to say my parents, unlike many of us, they own 2 homes. With their sacrifice, they were able to buy 1 house, and they were like, how in the world are we going to afford it? It was $75,000 at the time, 1986. And a few years later, my mom saved. Till this day, they keep the money under the mattress. You think it's a joke, but it's true with them. Anyway, and bought a second home. Now they're retired. They have a pension. Well, let me back up. My younger sister Sylvia was born in El Paso. So when we came, we were, like I said, undocumented until we were 13. I was 13, twins were 12, and Sylvia was the only US citizen. So Sylvia at the time was 9 years old, was able to sponsor the family into getting our citizenship. We had to go back to to El Paso, go in front of a judge, ask for a pardon, and then start the process for us to become documented. Sylvia was only 9 years old. Now the laws have changed. You have to be 21 or older, and you have to show proof of income. Now I say that because if the law was in place when I was that age, we would not have been here. I was a second language learner. That's why I'll get into it, don't worry. I think it's important that you know that story, so that you understand not just my life, I guess, or the reason that I do what I do, but to also make you understand, or hopefully you understand that we're all here because we want a better life. And what we do with it is to be determined. Anyway, I was in high school, Belmont High School in downtown LA, and when I started high school, I started in elementary school third grade, and then went to junior high, and then went to high school. But when I was in high school, I knew that I was smart. I just knew that I was smart because I catch on to things really quickly. My kids, I have a 17 and a 16-year-old. They're like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I have what I call useless knowledge, right? Like it's in there, and I have no idea where I picked it up. But if the kids ask me, they're like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "I have no idea." But I knew I was smart, and I went to my counselor at Belmont High School. And now I graduated in 1987, so it was not the 1950s. And I went to the high school counselor, and I was like, "Hey, I want to go to college. I'm going to exaggerate later. I want to go to this place called college." And he was just like, literally told me, "Honey, you're just going to get pregnant. Why would you want to go to college if you're just going to be pregnant? So let me put you in home ec." And those of you that are old enough, you know what home ec is, right? We learn how to sew and cook and clean and all of that. And I was like, but I'm the oldest. So, and my parents didn't speak English. I barely spoke the language. And so I didn't have a mentor or, an advocate or anybody to basically tell the counselor that was wrong. So I was like, okay, I didn't know what to do. And so obviously he didn't put me on a college track. So I had the grades, but I just didn't know what to do because he was like, "You should be in home ec, see you later, goodbye." And it was like basically the last he really talked to me. And my sister Susan is a year behind me. He told her the same thing. My brother Robert, who is Susan's twin, was really, and I think again I'm getting to this. It's really important. My brother, when we came from Juarez the second time, Susan and I don't remember the second grade, so I think somehow in between, I just got put in third just because of the age, not because I had already gone to second grade. And so I came in third grade, but Susan and Robert are twins, And Susan was put in second grade, but my brother, we were all tested right before. There's a law that states you cannot place a child if you didn't test them in their native language. And so the law wasn't in place yet. So my brother, all of us got tested in English. Now, we spent a little time in Weenie, so we picked up English, just kind of on the playground and all that. So we didn't completely fail, but we didn't pass with flying colors. However, they put us in a regular classroom. My brother basically was like, I don't know what this is, so he just didn't do anything, and he got a 0. So my brother Robert was placed in a special education classroom for emotionally disturbed, severely emotionally disturbed classroom. And he was misdiagnosed. The reason he didn't answer anything is because he couldn't read in English, and so really changed his whole entire trajectory, if you will.
We'll get back to Next Round in just a moment, but first, are you getting PRI's regular email updates? If not, go to pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get the facts you need to fight back delivered every week to your inbox. Every week, PRI sends you what you need to know about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, and gives you the free market ideas needed to save our state and our nation. By going to pacificresearch.org and clicking the sign up button, you can sign up to have Policy Alert, our weekly roundup of all the best ideas from PRI scholars delivered to your inbox. Or you can sign up for event updates so you're the first to know when PRI is coming to your community with great events. So sign up now at pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get PRI's content delivered to your inbox each week.
And I get emotional because I'm the oldest. I'm only a year and 4 months older than the twins. However, in a lot of ethnic families, I'm supposed to take care of everybody. And so till this day, everything that I do is hoping to save my brother. My brother's okay, but he dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. When he was misdiagnosed, it took the school district like 2 or 3 years to finally realize, hey, he's not special ed, he just doesn't speak the language. By then, his self-esteem is in the toilet. He would come home and here's his twin sister and his older sister were excelling, and he's like, I'm stupid. Just everything that you would imagine somebody that has low self-esteem. By the time they caught it, he was just like, I'm stupid. That was his wording. And he dropped out of high school in the 9th grade because it never occurred to anybody at the school district that, hey, we screwed him up, let's fix it, right? And they didn't. So that's important for you to understand that everything that we do is based on, I call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You tell, he kept saying he was stupid, so there was nothing more that he could do. I knew I was smart, so I wanted to do better. Anyway, I didn't go to college right away. I graduated from high school, started working because I was helping the family, went back. I went to East Los Angeles College. Then I went to Azusa Pacific University, where I have a bachelor's degree. In 2000, there was a shortage of teachers. I became a teacher, went back to APU, and now have a master's degree in education. Now, and I have to just say this just for my own, satisfaction. My goal is to do the commencement speech at my high school and, tell all those kids, and this is what my speech is gonna sound like. Hi, I'm Blanca Rubio, and I graduated from Belmont High School, and somebody here told me that I was not good enough for college, but I'm gonna tell you something. I have an AA degree, a bachelor's degree in business, a master's in education, and I have an office in that big white building in the middle of Sacramento. So if my counselor didn't think that I was capable of college, there's no way that he would ever think that I could have an office as one of 80 legislators. And ladies, I have to say this, there's been 4,500 male legislators. I was woman number 153. And not only that, thank you, I'll take that. Not only that, but Senator Susan Rubio, my sister, was told exactly the same thing by the same counselor. She also has a bachelor's of AA, bachelor's and master's, and she is a senator at the state capitol. We're the only sisters Just so you know, only sisters in the history of California to serve in the legislature, not concurrently, just ever. So I was woman 153 and sisters woman 163. I think we're up almost up to 200, but it wasn't because, you know, there was no, just the odds were not in our favor as females. But I tell you all of that because our trajectory was completely different than my brother. My brother now lives in Kansas, and he works for the county, so he's gonna be fine. He's gonna get a pension, you know, all of that. But he could have been the third legislator, you know, at the state capitol. But because of the education system, I'm bringing it back. Because of the education system, you know, he didn't have the same opportunities that we had. Now, I wasn't necessarily given the opportunities, but I was like, we're doing this. I'm gonna kick those doors down. And, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's in spite of the counselor or, you know, to spite him or because of him is where we are. We'll never know. But the point is that when I came to the legislature, in between there, I got a teaching credential and I taught for 16 years. I taught kindergarten for 3 years, 5 years in first grade and 8 years in fourth grade. In between all of that, somehow I'm here. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be a legislator one day, because I had no idea what that meant. But I started on a water board 28 years ago. I spent 8 years in a water district. So those, my mechanical people here, I speak pipes, if that makes any sense. Then I decided I was going to go and run for the school board because I didn't want what happened to my brother to happen to any other kid. So I went and became a teacher, but at the same time I was a school board member. I spent 13 years as a school board member, 16 years as a teacher, and this is my 9th year in the legislature. And back to, you know, why I think that was really important for you to understand that, you know, you can see somebody and you'll never know what their background is or why. And when I was a teacher, the parents used to call me la maestra regañona, the scolding teacher, because I was like, Juan didn't do his homework. And they're like, but teacher, in Spanish, but teacher, you know, he can't, whatever the excuse was. And I was like, nope, not accepting any excuses. And they're like, well, teacher, it's because we're undocumented. I was like, okay, I was undocumented too. What else? Well, I don't speak English. Yep, my parents still don't speak English and I didn't either. Next, they're like, well, we don't have any money. I'm like, well, you know, being undocumented is synonymous with not having any money because you don't come here because you're rich. I said, what else? They're like, I said, no. I said, I am not going to allow for your children to not be succefful. If I am your children's teacher right this minute, then all of you can do this. And I would lecture them, la regañona, I would be like, was you didn't leave your country. You left everything you know, your family, your friends, your home, your belongings to come here for a better life. I am an example of why we come here. We came here for a better life. And for me, I love all of you and I love everything that I do. But at the end of the day, every single time my parents are like so proud of what I've done, I've made it. Their dream to bring us here was for us to be better. And how much better can we be? We'll talk about the politics part later. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I want to be in here all the time, but the point is that we came here to have a better life. I didn't come here for a handout. I didn't come here because I was going to take advantage of the system. I came here to get an education and to give back. So I became documented when I was 13. I became a citizen in 1994 and held my very first political office in 1997. So 3 years later, I was like, I'm doing this, right? And you could see it, you could feel my passion for doing the right thing and doing right by kids and by everybody. Now, I'll hand it back off because I can hold your attention forever, but it's important that you understand those things about me and about, you know, the immigrant community, because I know there's a lot of rhetoric going on, and I try to avoid that and really focus on the things that matter. And right now, the things that matter is making sure that our kids are okay.
I appreciate that. I mean, what an incredible story.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Well, I mean, we have time really to just focus on your legislation. Mm-hmm. So you introduced AB 2222.
Yes.
And you know, for those of you who don't know much about how reading is taught in California. So, currently, it's taught in a very ineffective way that does not use what's called the science of reading, which involves phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension, the 5 pillars of science of reading. And that's the most evidence-based, effective way to teach reading. And unfortunately, California classrooms do not use that for the most part. And you introduced this legislation in order to ensure that that method is used in curriculum and in teacher training. So could you just tell us a bit about that, and unfortunately why it was not passed out of the Assembly?
Oh, it didn't even get a community, well, no, it got a hearing, well, let me start by saying that I did spend 16 years in the classroom, and I gave you all of that so that you know that it's important not just for the kids in California, but it's important to me as a teacher, as a sister, as all of these things. So when we introduced AB 222, I was like, no brainer. Everybody, all my colleagues are all like, yes, education. However, it's a political conversation, which we do politics. There's policy and there's politics, and I completely understand that. I'm now a seasoned politician, and I can see where sometimes I have to be political, and sometimes we have to negotiate, right? And for me, when I introduced that bill, because I was a kindergarten teacher, a first grade teacher, and a fourth grade teacher, I can tell you that I know what I'm talking about. I know that kids are not achieving. The data's amazing, but guess what? Data doesn't have to tell me. I know, I lived it. I taught in Baldwin Park for 3 years, and then I taught in Fontana for the last 13 years. I would get students that, first of all, it's in Fontana, it was a third African American population, a third Hispanic population, and a third white population. Guess what they all had in common? Poverty. So it doesn't matter the color of the child or what their background is. It's the poverty issue is also very prevalent because a lot of these kids were living in hotel rooms, and we call them transient kids. So I would get them and I'd be like, oh my God, I got you. And I prided myself in making sure that I was an effective teacher, not for me, but to make sure that those kids had a chance at doing whatever is that they wanted to do. We had this college going program where everybody's like, you can go to college, and the kids, each classroom picks a school, and they do the chant of Stanford or whatever the college that they choose. And I was like, yeah, but are we setting them up? Because if we're not giving them the basic instruction, their dreams of going to Harvard and Stanford and all of these schools we're just lying. I mean, I'm not going to say that, but we were lying to the kids. I think we are lying to the kids, because if we don't prepare them first, then we can say whatever we want. There'll be a few of us that will somehow, get through and do eventually what we wanted to do. I graduated college the first time, or my bachelor's in 99. I graduated in 87, so 12 years later, I finally did this. So how can we tell kids, hey, this is what you're going to do, and they can't read? I had kids, and when I started teaching fourth grade, I had kids that were reading at first grade level, second grade level, third grade level, fourth grade level, maybe some fifth grade level. The variety of grade levels is nearly impossible for one teacher to address. And so when I saw the science of reading, it takes kids, first of all, you have to assess them all the same. Assess them and figure out what grade level they are. And then based on that, the science of reading dictates, okay, if the kid is at first grade level, then they're missing phonics, phonemic awareness. When in fourth grade, the first 3 years, or the first years of school are called learning to read. The last 3 years are reading to learn, right? So by the time you get to fourth grade, you're supposed to be fluent, a good reader, so that now you can learn history and literature and all of those amazing things. But if they can't read, then it's like doing all of this for nothing. And so for me, I had an amazing team. My partner teachers, we would assess the kids, and then we break up into groups. I was the one, because I taught kindergarten and first grade. I would address the kids that were kinder and first grade level, sometimes second grade level. Then my partner teacher would address those in third grade and fourth grade, and then the other teacher would give the kids kind of the the excellent, the above grade level. The science of reading is evidence-based, research-based instruction that doesn't guarantee that the kids are going to learn, but now you have an opportunity because you're following not a curriculum. This is where the mistake is, not the curriculum, because the pushback that I got was like, oh, the curriculum is too scripted. I'm like, this is not curriculum. This is a strategy on how to teach kids how to read. And we got a hearing. It was ceremonial, because I had cut deals with everybody to get it heard, and I was prepared. And my friends at CTA decided it wasn't what they wanted, and so they killed the bill. The chair of the committee killed the bill because he was told that they didn't like it, and I was livid because we had cut a deal that give me at least. Get it through the committees. You can kill it in appropriations if you want, because one of the strategies to killing bills is giving it a huge price tag. So when you go to appropriations, they're like, oh, well, it's going to cost millions of dollars, so we're just going to hold it. They hold it in suspense is what it's called, essentially killing the bill. And the fact that I had cut a deal, good faith. And I said, look, if you want to kill it in approps, kill it in approps, but let me go through the process. So now that we have a foundation, I have a term that I say, bills die, authors don't. And so if we at least have gotten the committee and kind of a true negotiation, even if it died in appropriations because we didn't have the money for it, then this year or the following year we can start there and then address the issues of money. And so, nope, killed the bill. And our goal.
Have you given reasons?
No, just because that's the frustrating part, right? That's the political part of it. There is no reason. Why would you kill a bill that way when California is one of the last, our achievement hasn't changed in 30 years? Because they're like, oh, I had a fight with CABE, the California Association of Bilingual Educators. I told you my story. I didn't speak English. So you're speaking to, I'm like, come on, people. There's nothing you can tell me that's going to make any sense. So we were on a Zoom with 12 people, and they're like, Assembly Member, and this was, honestly, I was just floored, but Assembly Member, we don't think that the science of reading addresses the issue of second language learners. Okay. I said, well, tell me what part of the bill it doesn't. And they're like, well, Assembly Member, right now it's just a philosophical difference. And I was just like, you don't want to hear what I said, but I said, okay, I will make you a deal. Because we were on a Zoom. I said, I will make you a deal. There's 12 of you on this Zoom right now. I will fly any of you that want to, we'll get in a room. We will go through my bill line by line by line by line, and we can negotiate it. If it's not negotiable, then we'll go on, but sit with me and we'll do this. And they're like, Assembly Member, at this point, it's just philosophical differences. And I was pissed off. And I was like, goodbye, and I hung up. Because at that point, if you're not even willing to sit with me and pretend, like I'm a politician, I can take it, pretend like, go in the room with me, pretend that you helped, and then we can move on. But for them not to even engage was ridiculous. And what we heard was, we don't think that's the right answer. Well, then give me the right, don't tell me. One of the things as a teacher I can tell you, as a mom, I'm like, don't tell me you can't, tell me what you can do, right? Let's start with what you can do, and then we'll work backwards. I'm a teacher, let's backwards map. We'll start with what the intended goal is, and we'll work backwards to see what can work. But for them not to even engage was just ridiculous. So that was the frustration that I explained,
You should have heard the interview I had with her for the book.
Yeah,
this is the G-rated version.
Yes, yes. Well, because we're not fighting for me.
That's right.
We're fighting for kids.
So anyway, we're a bit on a tight time schedule right now, so this conversation could go on for hours, and we've just actually, unfortunately, you can maybe have a chance to talk to the Assembly Member as she's walking back, but I will just say that if you want to...
Teacher training, I didn't realize till you addressed our group in St. Helena that they're not taught.
No, they are not. No, unfortunately, and that's one of the things, and I highly recommend, not just because I wrote it, but because, all of this information is included in my book, The Great Classroom Collapse. And it's truly a collapse. And, it's curriculum, it's instructional methods, it's teacher training, it's all of these sorts of things that are all coming together to collapse mathematics and reading in not just California, but across the country. As I say, Assembly Member Rubio's chapter is one of the most enlightening chapters in the book, and I hope that you get it just to see where we are as a state and where we can be if we had the vision to look at empirical evidence as was included in AB 2222.
Yes. Well, just because it's a plug for sure, I'm doing the bill again. We're not calling it the science of reading because people have a heart attack if I call it that. We're renaming it, but the intent is the same. We've brought it down a little bit. We're introducing the bill again, and I would love to send you the bill number when I need help. I by far got the most advocates to join my group, and in spite of all of the advocates and the hundreds of organizations that were with me, the bill was killed. I'm doing it again, and I need 100 more organizations, because at some point we have to push to make sure that I gotta tell you, the whole thing about the money is BS. Because we already have money for curriculum and we have money for teacher training. So that is a non-excuse, but I'll accept it. But I need all of you to partner up, and I will go and hope that, hope is not a strategy. I will strongly suggest that if you are interested in this, please join me, and we'll send you the information on the new bill. The bill introduction is this week. We don't have a number yet. When we do, we'll go ahead and send it out. But I need all of you to at least write a letter and say we support, and these are the reasons. And you'll get a copy of the bill, and I need the help because the kids need us. Thank you.
If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And when you're on these platforms, don't forget to give us a big 5 stars. If you don't subscribe to any of these, you can still listen on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/Pacific Research 1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Ichon. Hope you'll come back again for next round with PRI.